This is the third and last episode in our mini-series dedicated to the season of autumn. We're going to delve into the fascinating world of fungi. Now, there's more than meets the eye in their world because so much of the life of fungi takes place below ground. Couple that with the fact that they are neither plants nor animals, and we find we're dealing with a life form that has some remarkable features. So before we meet our guest, let's remind ourselves of some of the features we can see. If you're looking for something bold and beautiful, you can't do much better than the fly agaric. Its strident red with a white crusty sprinkling on top is definitely an arresting sight. Strangely, sometimes quite difficult to find, but well worth the search. By contrast, the royal fly agaric is much more subtle. However, I'm not sure if this example is in fact a panther cap. It does illustrate that deciding what you're looking at may require help. Now, because of its size, the bracket fungus is much easier to find. You'll often see that beneath it is a generous sprinkling of its orange spores, and it's a good example of a fungus which has a smooth underside. I've recently invested in a mobile app that gives good illustrations of each species and is definitely well worth getting. Key pointers would be features like, is the underside pleated or smooth? What colour is the stem? Does the stem have a skirt or collar on it? Perhaps it's time to invest in a personal expert, which is exactly what I did when I visited Kew Gardens. Welcome to the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, and I'm here today to have a conversation with Laura Martinez-South about fungi. We're very familiar with seeing toadstools and mushrooms in the forest. Those are the fruiting bodies, but there's a lot more that we don't see. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And so let's think a little bit more deeply about what we don't see. So, Laura, classification of fungi, they're not animals and they're not plants, so what are we dealing with here?
Well, we are dealing with organisms that have their own kingdom, and in fact they are more closely related to animals than they are to plants. Unlike plants, they cannot photosynthesize, so they need to obtain their carbohydrates, their food, from other sources. So that means that they are heterotrophs, like we are. But we digest our food. We have our enzymes inside our guts. Fungi release the enzymes into the substrate, and then they absorb the nutrients.
We have fungi under the ground, living, and above the ground. So can you tell us something about the underground world, the mycelium and the mycorrhizal side of fungi?
So the mycelium is formed by fungal filaments. These are tubular cells when the spores of the fungi that are produced by the fruit bodies, the toadstools or the truffles, they germinate. They form these tubular filaments that they spread into the substrate. It can be the soil, it can be a plant, it can be an animal, and they branch and they fuse. That is mycelium. It's the several hyphae growing into a substrate. Mycorrhizal mycelium or mycorrhizal networks, that is a different thing. So there are fungi that lost the ability to get carbon from organic matter. So they rely on the carbon transfer from the plants. So the plants fix carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and they transform it into sugars. that they pass into these fungi. And in exchange, these fungi that they are in the roots forming mycorrhizas, fungus roots, they spread into the soil through the mycelium, and they get nutrients and water that they transfer back to the plant. And when this mycelium extend into the soil from the mycorrhizas, that they are these symbiotic organs formed between the roots of the plants and the fungi, and they spread into the soil, they can also connect to other plants of the same, that they associate to the same fungi, and those are the mycorrhizal networks.
Sounds like a very complicated existence. I think you used the word kingdom, which sounds very appropriate.
Yeah?
Yeah, they're living in their own place, yeah. So we don't see fungi everywhere, so what places do they prefer? Are there particular trees, or is it to do with the humidity or the soil type?
Well, one of the things is, even if we don't see them, they are probably there.
Ah,
It's just that they are hidden. They have these cryptic life cycles. They live in soil. They live, as I said before, inside the roots of the plants or inside the tissue of the plants or inside animals. So we don't see them, but their bodies are there in form of mycelium
yeah.
or spores. And we only see them when they reproduce and they form mushrooms or they form truffles. But they, for being able to reproduce, for instance, they need certain environmental conditions, some of them like moisture and certain temperature. So that's why in many cases we see them fruiting in autumn. But there are other ones that are always there, like for instance the bracket fungi,
Oh, yes.
those ones that you see on the trunks,
Yeah.
or lichens, that is a symbiosis between fungi and an alga or a cyanobacteria. They are also more perennial. So there are some fungi that reproduce and then we can see them in autumn. Other ones, they fructify. Other ones, they produce mushrooms in spring.
Ah.
And some of them, they don't even produce them. So we never see them.
Oh, sneaky.
Sneaky,
Yes.
sneaky ones.
Are we talking about mycorrhizal networks small or big, or both?
It depends on the fungi that form them and how stable they might be, because mycorrhizal networks occur below ground in the soil, and many small invertebrates or mammals, small mammals can break down those networks. So in the root of one tree, when there are fungi connected to the roots and spreading into the soil, the networks can become quite large. In terms of connecting, when the same fungus is connected, for instance, to the roots of two different plants, those ones might be less permanent, and it will depend on how many fungi are forming them.
Yeah, yeah. So it'll always be the same fruiting bodies will come at the surface from that particular network.
Yes,
Yeah.
if it's formed by the same fungus, but the networks can be formed by many different ones.
Ah, yes.
Growing in parallel.
Yes.
It's just that different fungi do not fuse. They need to be compatible, which means that the networks are really formed by one individual fungus that is connecting to different roots.
Excellent. You mentioned briefly about symbiosis and the relationship between the fungi and the plants and trees. How much difference does it make to the life of both?
It makes a huge difference.
I was hoping you were going to say that. Yes.
Well, in fact, 90% of the plants on Earth live in symbiosis in the roots with mycorrhizal fungi. And without them, they cannot survive. So plants cannot survive without fungi, and fungi cannot survive without plants. In the case of trees, there are no trees without mycorrhizal fungi in the roots. It's just that different trees might associate with different fungi. So for instance, pine, oak, birch, sweet chestnut, they associate with fungi that cover the fine roots and get in between the root cells, but they don't penetrate the root cells. While maple, rowan, wild cherry, they associate with mycorrhizal fungi that penetrate inside the root cells. And it is essential because the fungi are able to get farther from the roots and the root hairs, increase the surface of absorption of water and nutrients, and can have access to smaller pores and farther distances from the roots, so they can get back to the plant water and nutrients that otherwise the plants wouldn't be able to access.
Of course, yes.
But at the same time, the plants are passing sugars and some fats from the photosynthesis to the fungi, so the fungi can grow and explore the soil. And by doing that, they are big pools of carbon. They are sinks for carbon from the above ground to the below ground. 75% of the carbon in terrestrial systems is stored in soil, and a large amount of that carbon is thanks to these fungi.
One of the current controversies is about the effects of climate change. So how are fungi surviving, if you like? How are they managing to cope with climate change as we've seen it in the last few years?
We know that climate change is the second threat to fungi after land use management. And we know that climate change is already affecting reproduction, growth, and activity of these fungi. In terms of reproduction, when they produce mushrooms or toadstools or truffles, there are studies from fungal specimens stored in the fungarium and also from citizen science that show that the period where these fungi are reproducing has changed. So it's extended, and that there are some fungi that produce more mushrooms than others, and that there are some fungi that are producing less mushrooms. So there is clearly an effect. Climate change can affect the fungi directly, affecting their growth, but also they can affect fungi indirectly through changes in the habitat. So fungi have the same threats that plants or animals might have. So we expect that temperature will increase and precipitation regimes will change, and those will affect fungi. For instance, in mountains at higher elevations where there are lower temperatures, an increase in temperature might produce plants shifting upwards and with them also fungi. And that will mean that fungi adapted to harsher environments at higher elevations will be replaced by other fungi less specialized on those conditions but adapted to warmer temperatures.
Okay. And I suppose we finish off our conversation with that problem of pollution in the environment.
We have seen that one of the main factors that affect fungi that live in symbiosis with the roots of trees in Europe but also in the UK are affected by nitrogen deposition, air pollution, and nitrogen is affecting them negatively. So we see that nitrogen reduced the number of species that form symbiosis with these trees, and the dominants are different and they have different functions. And we have seen that fungi that are particularly good at gathering nutrients from the soil and pumping carbon that gets stored in soil are the ones that are decreasing or even disappearing. And when these fungi change, those changes are linked to changes in the mineral nutrition of the trees. So trees suffer when these communities of symbiotic fungi change because of nitrogen pollution.
I see. Thank you, Laura, for sharing your extensive knowledge with us. We're very grateful to you for giving us your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.